record. It's today's topic is Word Mastering Paragraph Formatting with our instructor, Lori Dehowniak. And Lori, I am now turning the reins over to you.
Great, thanks, Terry.
Thanks, we do see your screen.
You can see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Mastering Paragraph Formatting. The focus today will basically be on this whole section here in the ribbon in Microsoft Word. And I'm going to be using the document that you see on my screen that you were provided with called Summary Docx. This is what, just to save a lot of time and entering information, I'm going to use this to demonstrate today's topics. So you may want to have that open if you want to follow along. So we're going to be sort of a breakdown of the paragraph formatting. We're going to be covering, first of all, paragraph alignment, and then looking at the difference between line and paragraph spacing, pagination control, so how you can control where your pages appear, indents and tabs, which is my favorite topic out of this whole thing. So I'll be giving you some tips and tricks in there, paragraph borders and shading, and as we go along, if there's any keyboard shortcuts for the features I'm showing you, I will be mentioning those. And then at the end of your handout, you will notice I provided you with a table of all the keyboard shortcuts that I would encourage you to actually print out and keep as a reference. So to start right off the bat then in paragraph alignment, the paragraph alignment is, as I mentioned, it's in this paragraph group, and it's these 4 icons right in here. And you can notice that right now one of them is highlighted, which shows me that's the paragraph format for the paragraph that my cursor is in. And I can actually see where my cursor, okay, I've just put my cursor here on the title, and I can see that it is left aligned. So if I want to change the alignment of a paragraph, as long as my cursor is in the paragraph, I actually don't have to highlight it. If it's only one paragraph that you're dealing with, as long as your cursor is in the paragraph, you can just basically put your insertion point there, and then you can choose one of the alignment buttons. So right now it is left aligned. So I'm going to go to the next one, which you can see I get a tooltip that says it's center. So now my paragraph will be centered. Now it doesn't look like it's centered on the page, and that's because this particular document has a larger left margin. So it is centered within the margins, which is what this alignment feature will do. And then if I go to the next one, which is align right, now my paragraph is aligned at the right margin. And then if I go to the last one, which is called justify, you'll see in the tip, it says it's going to distribute your text evenly between the margins. If I click on that, it just puts it back to the left. So it's not really obvious when you just have a single line to your paragraph. So now I'm going to go down to this first paragraph, which has 6 lines of text. And again, I'm just going to click somewhat. You can see my cursor is flashing here in the word target. So it's just in the middle of the paragraph. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to go to the center option. That would center the paragraph. The last one would right align it. Neither one of those looks really appropriate for this paragraph. But then the last one, if I click on justify, you can see now what has happened is my left margin is flush with the left side. My text is flush to the left margin, and now my text is flush on the right side. So it spreads out your text and it allows it to be justified. Now, all 4 of those have keyboard shortcuts associated with them, which you will see when you hover on the icon. So align left is Control L. So if I wanted to now make this aligned left again, instead of having to click the button, I can press Control L. Or Control R would be to the right, Control E for center, and then Control J for justify. I tend to use those keyboard shortcuts if I'm wanting to format as I type. So just to give you an indication of that, I'm going to just start a new document. So in my new document, if I knew I wanted to type something in the center, I could press Control E, that would put me in the center, and I'll just put in my title. And then when I press enter, notice it keeps me in the center. So now I could press Control L, and that would take me to the left. So it allows me to keep my hands on the keyboard and not have to stop and grab the mouse. There's nothing wrong with going up here and clicking center and typing your title, and then again clicking left. It's just, there's a little bit more back and forth with the hands because you're having to grab the mouse. So I always like people to be aware of the fact that you can do the keystroke as well. Now, if I want to access those options in a dialog box, this little arrow right here to the right of paragraph is what's called the Dialog Box Launcher. And if I click on that, that'll take me to all my paragraph settings. And there's two tabs to this up at the top. There's indents and spacing, and there's line and page breaks. You can see as I'm clicking between the two tabs. In the indents and spacings tab up at the top, you'll see the alignment right now is reflecting what I've currently done in this paragraph. So I could click here and choose left, and that would put it back to the left. And then a shortcut to getting into the paragraph, instead of going all the way up here, you can also right click and I can choose paragraph here. That'll take me to the same location. So as with a lot of things in Microsoft Word, there's always a few different ways of doing things. And as long as you are aware of them, you sort of pick the one that you're most comfortable with. Why I might use the dialog box is, let's say that I want this entire document to be justified. So you can see these paragraphs all the way through, it's all left aligned. So if I decided I wanted it all to be justified, I could right click on any paragraph, go to paragraph, or again, I could go up here and click that arrow. And when I change it to justified, I can click right here on set as default. And when I do that, right now, it says this document only. So that would mean that this document only will be justified. But if I want all of my documents to be justified, I could choose this option here. And it says all documents based on the normal template. So that would mean that any blank document I create from this point forward would be justified. It doesn't affect any of my existing documents. It just affects any of my future documents. So for in this case here, I'm just going to leave it on this document only. And now you can see now all of my paragraphs are justified. So that's one of the reasons why I would use that dialog box. Okay, so at this point, normally I would stop and ask for questions, but I'll just encourage you, if you have any specific questions on paragraph alignment, to go ahead and type those in the questions panel, and I'll deal with them at the end. Now, I'm just going to go back to that new blank document that I started, and I'll just get rid of this text. I'm going to move on now to line and paragraph spacing. Now, line spacing is referred to the space between each line within a paragraph, and paragraph spacing is referred to the space between the paragraphs. Now, just as an example now, I'm just going to type some text here, and it's not going to make any sense. I'm just going to type so you can see that when I get to the right margin and it wraps around, what I'm getting is a certain amount of space within my document, within the paragraph. When I press enter, you can see I got some additional spacing in between the paragraph, and now again the same spacing within the paragraph. Now, I'm not sure just by looking at this what kind of space I have received, how this is. So if I go now up to the paragraph dialog box, I can see that the default, so again, remember I started a blank document, the default is that the spacing after will be 8 point. So that's the space I got when I pressed enter. And then the line spacing is set for multiple of 1.08, which is just a little bit more than single spacing. So that's the standard default that Word 365 will give you. Other versions of Microsoft Word had different defaults, but that is the default for this version of Word. So if you weren't sure what your default was, before you started typing, you could go into the paragraph dialog box and take a look at this. To be honest, when I first started using this version of Microsoft Word, this irritated me because 8 point is less than, like 12 point would be almost the equivalent of a whole line if you were using 12 point font, but 8 is less than that. So I found the space too small, and I either want no space or 12 points. So this default doesn't necessarily make sense to me. Now, where I've also found this a bit irritating is in a case here, let's say I was wanting to type an address. So here I am typing an address and the text is separated. So when you have this spacing turned on, what's important to realize is that when you press enter, that's what establishes the fact that there is a paragraph. And so what you have the ability to do, and actually you can see here in my paragraph group, I have this icon turned on. This is the show hide button that shows the paragraph marks and other hidden formatting symbols. So you can see at the end of each of those lines, I ended up with a paragraph symbol. Now, what I could do instead when I type an address is instead of pressing enter, if I want to leave that paragraph space the way it is, I can press shift followed by the enter key, which you'll see puts in a curving arrow. And that now has created a new line without a new paragraph. So again, and then I was typing in the zip code at the bottom. So you can see each of these has created a new line. Now that can be used in a number of different areas. And when the paragraph marks are turned off, you don't see it. The only way you know that you've pressed shift enter is when those marks are turned on. So now I'm just going to I'll go back to summary and we'll just have a look at a couple of things here. So if I go down to, I'm going to go down to this section here in the marketing objectives. So this is on page 2 of the document towards the bottom. And I can see that enter has been pressed at the end of each of these numbers, and I have some space here. Now the spacing here is likely different, and I'm going to just highlight these 3 lines. And the reason why I'm highlighting all 3 is because I want to affect the spacing for all 3. So if I go up here to paragraph, here I can see in this document the spacing before is set for 0 and the spacing after is set for 12. And the line spacing within the paragraph is set for single. Now, if I wanted there to be less space between these lines, I could reduce this to 6. And now you can see there's less space. Or I could change it to 0 and there would be no space. Now, what I might have wanted to do is not include paragraph 3 here in my selection. But what I can do now is with my cursor on just item 3, I can go back to paragraph and I can put the 12 back in. So that way, these 2 lines have the paragraph space at 0, and then this one has the paragraph space at 12. Now I'm just going to undo that so I have it back to the way it was when I started. Now, another approach I could have taken is up here in the paragraph group, instead of going to the paragraph dialog box, I can go to this arrow, this icon that has 2 arrows on it. And if I click on that, you can see the line spacing is set for 1. And right down here, it says remove space after paragraph. If it said add space after paragraph, that would mean there's no space. So if I now choose remove space, you can see it's removed the space from the paragraphs. And now when I look up here, now it says add space. So I could put that back. And then if I was just wanting to reduce the space for these 2, you notice this time I didn't highlight them completely. As long as you grab part of each paragraph, that works as well. And then I can go in here and I can choose remove space. So this add space before and the add space after, this will always set 12 point at before and after. And if you want it to be anything different, then you need to go into the paragraph dialog box. And here I could take it down to 6 if I didn't want it to be a complete line. And that's affected, again, the 2 paragraphs that I had selected. So that's referred to as a paragraph space. And this whole document, if I wanted to change the line spacing for the whole document, if I didn't want to do it as a default, what I could do is select everything. I'm going to go to Control. I'm going to go up here to select, and I'm going to choose select all. And you can see when I hover on that, there's a keystroke of Control A. That's another way of selecting all. So I've selected the whole thing, and now I'm going to go into the line spacing. And you can see what's checked right now is 1, and I'm going to go to 1.15. So that now has increased the line spacing to 1.15 in between my paragraph. And now I'll go to 1.5. That gives me a space and a half. Then there's double. So you can see I can try each one of those while my text is still highlighted. And then you'll see there's an option here that says line spacing options. That's another way to get to the paragraph dialog box. And you'll notice that when I'm in here, Some of these boxes are empty, and the reason why some of them are empty is because there's a mixture of format within the document. There's some paragraphs that have a different left indent. There's some paragraphs that have different spacing, but you can see here's the multiple of 3 that I had selected. So when I chose that last option of 3, that's what set this to multiple of 3. And if there's a drop down here, and I can go back and choose single again, and that would be back to the way it was. And again, I can go back in here, the line spacing. And as I said, the default normally is 1.08, which is interesting that because that is a default, that's not one of the choices up here. You have 1.15, but you don't have the 1.08. But you can see it does actually make the paragraph a little bit easier to read. There's just a little bit more space than the single spacing. Now, the other thing that I sometimes do with my paragraphs is if I set it to exactly, so this document is using Calibri 12. So if I say exactly 12, you can see it tightens it up a little bit. So that means the line space in between is exactly 12, which you can see it just tightens it up a little bit. And sometimes I'll use that if I'm trying to, I might do that for the whole document. If I'm trying to make it take up less space, I might just change that point size down. Or I could also, instead of, if I felt that was a little bit too tight, I might want to try 13. You can see it just gives it a little bit more space. So you kind of have to experiment, but it is a good idea to make sure that it is the same throughout the document. Now in your handout, there's a suggestion if you really want them to be closer, you could try a smaller value other than it's suggesting. So if I have it at multiple, the other option I could try is multiple. And if I did 0.9, that's not quite a single line. So 1 would be a single line, 0.9. And again, that looks pretty close to what I did with changing the point size. So it just depends on whether you want to do it as an inch measurement. So when you're in here, the leaving it at multiple is line spacing. So like I can say 1, 1.5, 1.2, whatever. But if I do exactly, then it looks for it in point sizes. And a point is basically the height of the line. So whatever your font size is, if you go a little bit less, like if I went down now to 11, I think I would probably find it's too squished. Well, yeah, it's getting quite tight, but again, you can experiment with that. So again, the difference between the line and the paragraph, the line spacing is in between all the lines of the paragraph, and then the paragraph spacing is what happens either before or after. And I tend to always work with it after instead of before. But generally you wouldn't want to do both. So you just decide whether you want that space to come before the paragraph or you want the space to come after. And just to illustrate that a little bit more clearly here. So before I start, I'm going to go into the paragraph dialog box and I'm going to change this to before of 12. So you'll notice that I have my paragraphs are on, and I don't know if you noticed that as soon as I came out of there, it actually my cursor actually moved. You can see there's my cursor there. And when I changed it to 12 before, so watch as I click OK that paragraph symbol is going to move down. So that's how I can see that I've got space before. And now when I type, it looks like I'm getting space after, but it's because when I'm pressing enter, it's giving me the space before the next paragraph. And when I highlight the paragraph, that's how you really can tell that there's space before as opposed to space after, because here you see this highlighted space. If I change that now, so the space was after, now you can see the highlight is underneath it. So that's another way you can see that. Now, just going back to the example I gave you earlier of the shift enter, I'm just going to go to the end of this document and I'm going to press enter at the end of the last paragraph. I'm going to see that it gives me that extra space and I'm just going to type the contact information for this. So when I press enter. Again, I'm getting that extra space. So as I did show you earlier, when you type in an address, if you press shift enter instead, you will get a new line without that extra space. So I'm just typing the address that you see at in the example in your handout. So that allows me to not have to change the paragraph spacing before I type something like an address. And when I check my paragraph options, I can see that it's still set for 12 point after and the multiple spacing. But because I'm using shift enter, it's treating this whole thing as one paragraph. So this would all be considered one paragraph. So if my cursor was in it and I chose right align, it would move the whole paragraph. So I didn't have to highlight the whole thing because it is considered one whole paragraph. And this is what defines the paragraph is at the end. You can see the paragraph symbol. Okay, so again, I'm going to move on to the next topic. So if you have anything specific about paragraph or line spacing, again, please feel free to put the questions in the chat panel. And now we're going to look at pagination controls. Now, basically what when the pagination options are set, this way you can easily control where the automatic page breaks are going to be inserted, and you'll be able to override them. And just to give you one example, I can see in this paragraph here, marketing effort 3, company street team, the paragraph that follows it, you can see the paragraph has split. And the paragraph has split, so there's at least 2 lines that go to the next page. So this is actually, pagination is all right. But what you will sometimes see is that the last line of a paragraph may be left at the bottom of a page, or it might be carried to the top of the page. So if a single line of a paragraph is left at the bottom of a page, that's considered an orphan. And if the last line of a paragraph goes to the top of the page, is considered a widow. And Word has a default setting of widow and orphan control. So with my cursor in this paragraph, if I go up to the paragraph options, and if I click where it shows line and page breaks up here at the top, I will see that the widow and orphan control is turned on. So it is, you'll want to have that turned on as a default. And if I just start I'm going to just again start a new document. If I go up to paragraph, I can see it's already checked. So if you started a new document and you checked to see whether this was on and you saw that it was off, what would be a good idea to do is turn it on and then choose set as default. And then when you choose the set as default, it would be a good idea to choose all documents. And that way, any future documents would have the widow and orphan control turned on, because it is actually best practice to make sure that you don't leave a single line of a paragraph either at the bottom or the top. Now, I never remember whether it's a widow or which one's a widow and which one's an orphan, as long as you remember that you don't want to leave a single line at the bottom of a page. It's either a single line of a paragraph or a heading in a document. Although I think I've got an example here in this one. Yeah, so here I do have, this paragraph was left all alone, but because it is a single line, even though the widow and orphan control is on, it hasn't paid attention to the widow and orphan control for this single line paragraph. So if that happens, you don't control that with widow and orphan control. What you use instead is something called keep with next. And keep with next is used when you want to keep paragraphs together. So I want to keep this heading with the following paragraph. So as long as my cursor is on the paragraph, I can go up here to paragraph, and if I click keep with next, that will force that paragraph to be kept with the next paragraph. And that's a better practice to get into instead of just putting in a hard page break. I could have, I'll just undo that. I could have gone to the beginning of this text and gone under layout and breaks and chosen page. That would do the same thing, but it's put in a hard page break in my document. And if I was still editing my document and adding more text, I might end up with big gaps in my document because of this manual page break. So it's better not to force it to the next page with a manual page break. It's better to force it by going to the paragraph dialog box and choosing keep with next. And that way, and you'll see that there's a little square now that's showing beside the heading. That is showing up because my paragraph marks are on. If my paragraph marks are off, it doesn't show up. But what that tells me is that there is a pagination control applied to that paragraph. So because I chose keep with next, it just lets me know that I've chosen one of these options in here. Now, it doesn't do it for the widow and orphan control, but it does it for these other options. Now, the difference between keep with next and then the other option is keep lines together. Where that would apply, I think I've got a paragraph, might be, it's probably because I've already put, I'm going to take this keep with next off here for a sec. And then I'm going to change the spacing back to what it was. What did I have? Okay, I'm looking for the paragraph, lost the paragraph that was split. Huh, I lost it. There was a paragraph that was split where some of it was on the other page. So when the paragraph was split, how I can change that is with the keep lines together. So keep lines together would force this paragraph to always stay together. And again, it's got the little paragraph symbol here, or the little square dot to indicate that there is. So I don't know, when I see that square, I don't know whether keep with next is turned on or keep lines together. The only way you'd be able to tell is to actually come into the dialog box and see. But again, that's what you use if you want to make sure that a paragraph does not get split. So the keep with next will take a paragraph and keep it with the text that the paragraph that follows. The keep lines together works within the individual paragraph. Now, if I go down to this example down here where it's left this paragraph, so this, because this isn't actually, this is 3 separate paragraphs, I wouldn't be able to keep it together. But what I could do is if I wanted to make sure that this all stayed as one block, I could highlight these 3 paragraphs, go into paragraph and choose keep with next. And that would force those 3 paragraphs to go with the one that's left on its own. And now it all comes over together. So that's another way you can control that. Now, I've just undone that because I want to show you another option. The other thing you could do is if you know that the marketing objectives always have to be at the top of a page, you can force a page break to appear before the paragraph. And again, this is instead of putting a manual page break in, this will force, no matter how the pagination works out, it'll always make sure that this particular topic ends up at the top of a page. So you can go into the paragraph options and choose page break before, and that will force it to the next page. But you don't actually see a page break. You don't see the dotted line that normally shows a page break. I'll just make sure you see that difference. So if I went and did the manual page break, you can see it actually says page break. Whereas if I do page break before, it doesn't actually have the word page break here, but it does force it to the next page. Now, I've had instances where I could tell that there was more space at the bottom of a page, and I couldn't figure out why the text was appearing on the next page. And it was because this option was turned on. So again, you can tell whenever you see that black square that there is some kind of a line and page break option set. So you would just have to go into paragraph, and there's where you would see why there was that page break. So if I didn't want the page break there anymore, I could uncheck that, and now it would go back to where it was. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the top of this document, and what I want to now get into is looking at indents and tabs. And for the indents and tabs, it's really important that you make sure that your ruler is turned on. And I don't know that I have included this in your handout. I just thought of this as I was talking about it, because my ruler is turned on, but I think by default, the first time you use Microsoft Word, the ruler is not on. So if you don't see this ruler at the top of your screen, you can go to the View tab, and in the Show group, there is a checkbox that says Ruler. So if it was unchecked, you can see the ruler is not showing. So if you don't currently see the ruler at the top of your screen, go into View and choose Ruler. And what that is going to allow you to do is to easily set your indents and your tabs. So I'm going to put my cursor at the start of this first paragraph in the executive summary. This is not a format that people use an awful lot right now. It's sort of acceptable to have paragraphs just line up left at the left margin. But when I first started working many years ago, it was common practice to have the first line of every paragraph to be indented. So just to show you so all that we would have done is we would have pressed the tab key at the beginning of the paragraph, and that would have given us a first line indent. And I've just done that now to show you how the ruler changes when you do that. And actually, I'm going to back it up again so I'm just going to focus up here on the ruler, and I can see these indent markers, they're all at the left edge. But as soon as I hit the tab key, you can see the top marker has moved in 1/2 inch. So the top marker, and when I hover on it, you'll see it actually says first line indent. So that has given me a first line indent by pressing tab. So if I went down to this one and hit tab, same thing, I get a first line indent. So it just gives you another way of visually changing where one paragraph starts. And it's when it's most often used is if you're double spacing a paragraph. Just makes it that much more defined where the paragraph starts. So that's the quickest way to create a first line. It's called a first line indent, and that's the quickest way to do it, just by pressing the tab key. And actually, I do see in your handout on page 10, I did make a reference to the ruler. I didn't see where that was. So there is a note about the ruler. Now, if I didn't want just a first line indent, I could create another indent by moving all of the markers. So if I press on you can see when I've got my mouse up here on the ruler, I've got it hovering right on the little rectangle. So there's actually 2 triangles and a rectangle. So with my cursor on my mouse on the rectangle, I can drag these markers over to 1/2 inch. Actually, sorry, I'm in the wrong. My cursor is in this first paragraph under executive summary. And you can see now when I drag it, all of the lines have moved in. So that is referred to as a left indent. So it's not a first line indent, it is a left indent. And it only affected that one paragraph because that's all that I had selected. So if I highlighted, say, both of these and now grab the marker, I've now changed the indent for both of them. So that's the left indent. And I could also grab the marker on this side. You can see there's just a single marker on the right side. That's for your right indent. And I'm going to drag that in 1/2 inch as well. So you can see what I've done is I've changed the left and right indent both the same. Now I'm just going to go down to the end of the document. So I'm in a different line. Let's say that I wanted to put in a reference down here. What's commonly used in a bibliography is you'll have, say, the author's last name, and then their first initial, and then there might be a second initial if it's given, and then you might put the year, the website it was last updated, and you can see as I'm typing, it's just putting the text back at the left margin. But what's common is to have the first, when you're doing a reference like this, is to leave the first line at the left margin, but have all the remaining lines be indented. So that's not a left indent like this. What it is I'm moving them, instead of grabbing the rectangle, I'm going to grab the little triangle and pull that in. So that's called a hanging indent. So it's used commonly for something like this. The other example is I might have, and you're going to see now, if I press enter, it's actually going to keep, when I press enter and go to another paragraph, it's kept the hanging indent. And now if I say wanted to type a subject line, and I'm just going to type some text, you can see that is another example of a hanging indent. So what I did here is when I typed the re, I pressed tab and then the text. So when you press tab after some text, the hanging indent will sit right on the actual where the tab is. So if I hadn't pressed tab, if I had just done, say, re and then a space and typed, you can see the hanging indent. So the hanging indent itself went to the half-inch position. So by pressing tab, that made it all line up. So if I was starting out from scratch in a new document, so I could type my re, could press the tab key, and then as I typed, as soon as I saw that my re line was going to take up more than one line, I could grab the little triangle and I could pull it in. Now, that is not my preference though to creating a hanging indent. I prefer to use a keyboard because I find using my mouse to grab these markers is really tedious and not easy to control. You have to have really good hand-eye coordination to kind of get them to move the way you want. So I'm just going to move them back. So when my text wrapped and I realized I wanted to create the hanging indent, it doesn't really matter where my cursor is when I do this, but I can press Control and the letter T, which creates the hanging indent. So instead of dragging the marker myself, I can press the Control key followed by the T, and how I remember it's T is T for tab. So Control T makes the text line up where I've pressed tab. So I tend to use that as a shortcut instead. And then if I put the hanging indent in, and then I went back now, and now I want to type a regular paragraph, you can see my regular paragraph is going to have that indent. So to remove it, I can press Control Shift and T, and that will remove the hanging indent. And then if I went down and I wanted to have another paragraph that was indented, again, instead of moving the markers by now grabbing on the bottom, I can do Control M, and Control M, you can see it's moved in all of the markers. And now when I type, I get a left indent. And if I do Control M again, it's going to move. So each time I use Control M, it's going to move in half an inch. So it's based on the default tab settings that the document has. So it's going to go in increments of half an inch every time I press Control M. So if I've moved in and I want to move back, I can use Control Shift M, and that moves me back. You can see now I've gone back to that. So I'm looking at the ruler each time, and I can see that the markers have moved back. So Control M to move in, Control Shift M to move back, or with the hanging indent, Control T to put it in. Again, I can see up here the indent, or Control Shift T to move it back. Now, what's interesting is there isn't a keyboard shortcut for the right indent. So if I have indented a paragraph here like I did where it's in half an inch, if I want it to be half an inch on this side, I can drag the right indent marker in. There's no keyboard shortcut for that. But now, if I didn't want to use those keystrokes, I'm just going to go up here to the Layout tab. You can also see, so my cursor is in this paragraph here where I can see the indent markers have moved in. Here's the measurement that is put in up here. So under Layout, in the left and right indent boxes, there's a measurement. So if I wanted to increase that, I could just type now a 1 for both of those. And now I have a 1-inch marker. So that's easier, again, than having to move those markers. So the markers are more of a visual, but if you're good with measurement, then you can also just type the measurement in here. And what's nice here is if you wanted to do, say, like 3/4 of an inch, I'm just typing in 0.75, and you can see what it's done there on the ruler. So it's another way you can control it. As well, if I went into the paragraph dialog box, you can see there's also an indentation spot here that sets the left and right indent. And then if my cursor was in this first paragraph where the re was, if I looked by going into the paragraph dialog box, I can see there's the hanging indent set. So you can also set your hanging indent in this dialog box. So again, a few different ways of setting the same thing. And they have also, Microsoft Word has put a left and right indent button up here. So if I wanted to increase the indent, I can use in the paragraph group. That's the same thing as pressing Control M. And then this one to the left is the same thing as pressing Control-Shift-M. So you have a few different approaches that you can take there. Now you can also use the ruler to set tabs, and I've given you an example of some tabs on page 13 in your handout. Using the tabs will allow you to control where the text starts between the margins. And you can add, so normally when you press the tab key on the keyboard, it's the key just to the left of the letter Q. When my paragraph marks are turned on, I can see that an arrow appears. So as I press tab, my cursor is moving over 1/2 inch at a time. And what I've seen many people do is if they say they have something that they want to start over on the right side of the page, like say a page number or the word page, if you just keep pressing tab to get over there, it's not really the most efficient way to do it, because first of all, you're having to press the key a whole bunch of times, and you're not actually really controlling very well where the text is starting. So instead of tabbing a whole bunch of times, it's a good idea to set the tab stops. So in the example you see there on page 13, it's a list of percentages for 3 continents, or countries, I guess you'd say. So if I know that I want the word US to start at about 1.5 inches, I can go up to the ruler, and there's 1 and there's 2, so 1.5 inches is right in between. If I click my mouse there on the ruler, what ends up happening is I set there's a little marker there, and the little marker looks like an L, which means I have set a left tab. So now when I hit the tab key and I type the word US, it starts at 1.5 inches. So by default, when you click on the ruler, you will get a left tab. Now, notice over here on the far left of the ruler, just over here, just below the Save button on the Quick Access toolbar, there is an L. That is what's controlling that I'm going to get a left tab. If I click that icon once, it now changes to, looks like a little upside down T. That is a center tab. And if I click it again, I will get a right tab. So if I now set a right tab at 4 inches, so I'm going to now click at 4 on the ruler. And so now when I press the tab key and I type 15%, you can see it starts and it works its way back. So the text is actually right aligned at the 4-inch position. If I had set a left tab there, it would become difficult to actually get my numbers to line up. So if I know I want to have numbers, it's a good idea to set the right tab. So now I'm going to press Shift Enter to get to the next line because I don't want to have the spacing change. I'm going to press Tab, and now I'm going to type European. Press Tab, it now goes over to the 4-inch position, but now as I type 10%, my numbers line up nicely. Shift Enter again to get to the next line, and now I'm going to type the word Asia. And now when I type 7%, you can see it lines up. So if I had left it as a left tab, the 7 would line up with the 1, but because I've used a right tab, the percent symbols all line up. So that's an easy way to create 2 columns nicely. Now, some of you maybe have used tables. Tables is another way that you can set the same kind of a thing up, but the advantage of using tabs in this case, as you can see in the printed example I gave you, is I wanted to have dots between the names. So those dots that you see in the printout are what are called dot leaders. Now this table right now is all one paragraph. So these tabs that I've set are all part of the same paragraph. So I don't have to highlight them all now to modify the tabs. So if I want to now set this tab as a dot leader, what I can do as a shortcut is I can just go to this marker and I can double click. And what double clicking does is it opens up the tabs dialog box and it shows the 2 tabs that I set. So I want to click on the 4-inch tab because I want dots leading up to that 4-inch tab. So when I click on the 4, I can see it's right aligned, but the leader is set for none. So I'm going to click on this second option here, which is going to give me the dot. So I've clicked on the option, I'm going to click set, and then I'm going to click OK, and now I have dots leading up to those numbers. Now, if I hadn't pressed Shift Enter, my tables, this would still work. I would just have to make sure they were all highlighted before I double clicked on the tab marker. And then again, I went to the 4. Now, just to show you an alternative, if I'd gone to option 3 and set that, you can see it gives me dashes instead of dots. And then if I went back again and I chose option 4, you can see it gives me lines. So that's so you can use that if you were creating, say, a form of some sort. That way you get nice even lines, and you know that the lines, you can see they don't end evenly because they're actually going right up to the number. So it leads you right up to the actual number. Now, if I found that double clicking there was tricky, because if you're not quite on the tab and you double click, you can see I accidentally actually set another tab. So I'm going to cancel that. So if you set a tab where you don't want it to be, you can just click on it and drag it off the ruler. And so now as an alternative to get to that tab dialog box, instead of double clicking on the tab marker, I can go up here to the paragraph dialog box, and then I can click here in the bottom left on tabs, and it takes me to the same spot. It was faster to be able to get right on the tab marker though and double click. But again, if I'm having difficulty with that, I can go to the arrow and then to tabs. And now if I don't want there to be any dots now, I can click on the 4-inch position and I can choose none. And now they've been removed. Because one of the things that'll sometimes happen is if you didn't go and make sure that you had the 4, if I set dots now, without choosing the tab first, you can see I get dots leading up to my first tab set, which is not what I'd want. So I can go back in, click on the 1.5 and then set it back to none, and then click on the 4 and choose the single dots. Now you can see that time I didn't actually get rid of the other ones, and that's because I forgot to, when I chose none, I should have said set, and then the 4. Yeah, so when you're changing the settings for 2 different tab settings, you want to make sure that each time you change it, you click set before going to the next one. And now I've removed it on the first part. Now, when I press enter at the end of my tabs, I can look up on the ruler and you can see that the tabs are still there. So if I want to quickly clear all the tabs, I can either drag them off one at a time, or I can double click on one of them and then choose clear all. And now you can see I've cleared the tabs, and now I'm back to the default tabs. Now to give you another example of when you might use tabs, you can see in the printout, the handout that you've been given, in the middle of page 13, there's an example of some signature lines. And how this has been done is you can see if it shows you a picture of the ruler. I have set 2 left tabs, one at 2.5 and one at 4. So my cursor is here at the left margin. I'm going to click at the 2.5-inch position. And I can see that I'm getting a right tab, so I don't want that. So I'm going to pull the tab marker off. I'm going to go over here to the left where the tab settings are. And right now it's showing me that the default will be the right tab. If I click it again, you can see it goes to, it looks the same as the center, but it's got a little dot on it. That's a decimal tab. So that's what I would have used if the numbers I was typing had decimals in them. The next one is actually going to give me a vertical line. And you can see if I did that, if I click now, say at 3, it gives me a vertical line on my document. So I don't want that in this particular example. So I'm just going to pull that off. And then following that, you can see it gives me, that's the first line indent. So if I clicked on the ruler, it's just a quick way to move the first line. I find I would just tend to grab the marker and drag it. So I don't tend to use, but so that's the first line. That would be the other line, and then it's back to tab. So you can see each time you click, it sort of cycles through 4 tab types, a vertical line, and then 2 indent options, and then back to left tab. So I want to get it I'm just going to circulate through it till I get to the left tab. And now I'm going to click at 1.5, no, sorry, 2.5, and then at 4. So I've got 2 tabs set. And now if I just press tab on the keyboard, it moves me to the 2.5-inch position. But what I want to actually do is when it moves to that position, I want it to underline. So it actually creates the illusion of a signing line. So I'm going to turn my underline on first. And now when I press tab, you can see it actually gives me a line. And it gives me a line that I've controlled by setting the tab. So I know that that line is 2.5 inches. Now I'm going to turn my underline off, and I'm going to press Tab again, and now it jumps to the 4-inch position. And now I'm going to turn the underline on again, and I realize that I want one more tab over here right at the margin. Now you'll notice that you can't actually click right at the margin, so I'm just going to click a little bit before it, and then I'm actually going to drag the marker over, right, so it sits right on the right indent marker. And now when I press Tab, I get another line right to there. So there's my 2 signature lines. I'm going to press Shift Enter at the end of it to go to the next line. And now I'm going to make sure my underline is off. And now I'm going to type the word name. When I press Tab, it's going to take me to the end of the line, and I'm going to hit Tab one more time, and now I'm below. So now you can see I get a nice controlled 2 signature lines with the tabs, and you can see easily where it's all set up. Now, because I press Shift Enter, this is all one paragraph. So if I decided the line was too long, I could just grab my tab marker that's at 2.5, and I could drag it back to 2. So that would shorten the line. And then I could grab the marker at 4, and I could pull it back to 3, and you can see that's starting the line sooner. And then I could grab the tab marker here and drag it. So you can change the markers after the fact if you were kind of just visually wanting to set it up. And you can see I let go and I lost my tab marker, so I'm going to undo that. So when you're dragging the tab marker, it's important that you keep it on the line, that you let go when your mouse pointer is still on the ruler, and there you can see I lost it again. So I can actually just click at 5 and that'll put it back in. So again, if it does disappear, if you drag a little bit too far off, you can just reset it. Okay, and now I'm just going to go back to the top of my document. Actually, sorry, I'm in the wrong one now. I'm going to go back to the summary document, go to the top of that one. And now the last topic I want to look at is paragraph shading and paragraph borders. So first of all, for paragraph borders, if I have my cursor's on the first line of this document, and on the home tab in the paragraph group, there is an icon here. Looks like a little window pane. These are your borders. And when I click the arrow, you can see it shows me all the different borders. I'm going to choose outside border. And what that's now done is it's given me a nice border around the whole thing. So it looks like I've put a box around the text. And if the text was centered, you can see it looks like it's centered in the box. Now, I can customize the border that I get by going down here to the very bottom and choosing borders and shading. And I have different line styles in here to choose from. I'm going to choose a double border. And you can see now in the preview, it's put a double border around the whole thing. So now I have a double box around the image. Now you can also choose to only have specific words bordered. So as an example here, I'm going to put my cursor on the word industry. And if I go back in, and if I go down here to borders and shading, you can see by default, it's going to apply to the paragraph. So if I chose box here, there I get a box around all of that, but I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go back to borders and shading. And instead of leaving it at paragraph, I'm going to choose, now you see the only choice I have is paragraph, and that's because I didn't highlight the word first. If the word is actually highlighted when you go in, you see it defaults to text. So then you have a choice of text or paragraph. So if I now chose box here, I've now got a box around just the word. So I don't know how often you might do that, but that is an option. And sometimes I've had instances where I've ended up with a box around the words and I haven't meant to have it there. So if that happens, you just have to go in here and choose. Actually, what you have to do first is remove the box by choosing none, and then I can change it to paragraph and now choose box. And now I've got the box just around the paragraph. And actually that didn't work because you can see I still have the box around industry. So I'm going to choose none. There we go. And now it's gone. So as long as you've got the piece that you're working with selected when you go into the borders and shading, and you just look at the preview as to what's going to, so if you come in here and you see that it shows text, you'd make sure you had paragraph, and now If I wanted another kind of a border, I'm going to go with this one now. You watch the preview to see that it shows you what it's going to give you. If I decided now I didn't want a whole box, I just wanted a line, I could remove the top and the sides. And now what this is going to give me, because this shows me the paragraph, this is going to give me this double line underneath the whole thing. So that's another way you can sort of control the kinds of borders that you might have. Now, if I put a border in and I don't want it, again, as long as you're on the paragraph, you can go in. Here you would just you can choose no border, or you can go here to borders and shading and choose none. Both of those will have the same effect. And now as an alternative to a border, the button beside the borders you can see is it's the shading, and this actually represents like a little paint can that's tipping over. You can click on the drop down there and you could pick a shade of gray, and so that looks like I've got a gray box without any border to it. And it's probably a bit too dark for, there you go. So that gives you a nice way of sort of emphasizing a paragraph with some shading. And if you end up choosing black, my text is blue right here, so that just left it as blue. But if I say I had executive summary selected, and now you'll see it remembers the last choice that I made. So instead of having to click the drop down to choose it now, I can just click right on the button, and you can see it gives me black text. Now, normally what it should do, and I don't know why it didn't do that here, what I normally find is when I do a black, it automatically changes the text to white, but in this case it didn't. So I can go over here to my text and I can choose white. So that's an effect you often will see. It takes a lot of toner on your printer, but that is a nice effect that you can go with as well, is to get a nice black shade with the white text. Now, if you're working on a document that, say, somebody else has done and you don't like what format is there and you're not quite sure how it's been set up, an easy way to remove all the paragraph formatting is to highlight the paragraph in question. And instead of sort of backtracking and turning all these things off, on the keyboard, you can press the Control key followed by the letter Q. And what that does is it removes all of the paragraph formatting. So any indents, any tabs, any borders, it all removed. But it doesn't, you can see it didn't remove the font formatting. So it's just anything that is applied to the ruler or anything that's chosen in the paragraph group, including any of the line and page breaks, it would remove all of that. So instead of, again, trying to figure out sometimes what's been done, that's a nice keystroke to keep in mind. That's not to be confused with this one up here. This icon up here clears all the formatting, so that if I had chosen that instead, so instead of pressing Control Q, if I had clicked this, excuse me, the clear all formatting button in the font group, that removes the font formatting. So if you're just wanting to remove paragraph formatting, Control Q is the way to go. Now, the last feature I want you to see just before we finish up is something called reveal formatting. Now, years ago, there was a program called WordPerfect that was sort of the industry standard for word processing, and it had something called reveal codes, which would allow you to see the formatting codes in a document. Reveal formatting is similar to that, but it doesn't let you see the codes, but it does let you see what formatting has been applied. So to give you an example of that, I'm gonna put my cursor in this paragraph here that has the paragraph shading. And I'm going to first of all show you how you can access this feature just through by clicking your mouse. So you basically on the Home tab in the Styles group, if I go to the Dialog Box Launcher beside Styles, so this arrow right here, what that will do is it'll bring up the Style pane. And then at the bottom of the Style pane, there's 3 buttons here. The middle one is called the Style Inspector. So I'm going to click that one. So it's the A with the little magnifying glass on it. That brings up the Style Inspector over here, and then at the bottom of the Style Inspector, there's another button with an A and a magnifying glass, and you can see when I'm hovering on it, it says Reveal Formatting. So if I click on that, it opens up a panel on the right side of my screen. Which, sorry, that's never happened before. It just crashed the whole document. That's very strange. Okay, let me just bring it back. That's my handout. That's really odd. So let's go back to the summary document. Okay, so let's try. Okay, so here it is. There's the reveal formatting has shown up. So you can see my cursor's on this paragraph and it breaks it down into font, paragraph, and section. So it tells me exactly what's been done for the font and exactly what's been done for the paragraph formatting. And you can see that each little section has a hyperlink in it. So if my cursor was on the executive summary and I didn't know how they got that black bar, I could see by looking here that there's some shading. So I could click on the shading. It brings me right into the spot where the shading is, even though I didn't apply it in this area. But I could just go in here and choose no color. And then that would take it away. Now I can also see that my font is different. So if I have, and for the font formatting, you always have to have the text highlighted. Here I could see it shows a font color. So by clicking this blue area here, I could see that I'd have to choose. So it kind of takes you, it sort of leads you to where you need to go to change the options. So it's not like I can just delete the code, but at least it shows me where I could go to control it. So I can see, like, if I wanted to change the line spacing, I could click here on spacing. It takes me to the right spot and I can make the spacing 0. So at least it leads you to what has been done for the formatting. And then you can just click on the different sections to see what you might need to change. Now that was a lot of steps to get into that area though. So if I want to easily more quickly access the reveal formatting, I'm just going to click this X here to turn it off. Keystroke to get in there is Shift F1. Shift F1 takes you very quickly into the same dialog box. So that's, or the same panel. So that's a quicker way to go, is to remember the keyboard shortcut of Shift F1. Or you could add it to your toolbar. And a quick way to add it to your toolbar, I'm just going to go to the end of my quick access toolbar on this arrow. Now, if your quick access toolbar is up here, you can click the little arrow and choose show below the ribbon first. And then if I go to more commands, and then right up here where it says show commands from, if I change that to commands not in the ribbon, and then if I scroll down into the R's, you can also click here and type the letter R to get quickly into the R's, you will see reveal formatting is an option right here, and I can click add. So that way, whenever I want to use reveal formatting, instead of remembering Shift F1, I can click this little A and it brings the panel up. So if you think it's something that you're going to use from time to time, it's not a bad idea to add it to the toolbar as a shortcut. And then finally, on the last page of your handout, you will see last 2 pages, I have given you keyboard shortcuts for all of the different options that I've shown you today. I didn't emphasize the line spacing options you can see are in there of Control 1 will give you single spacing, Control 2 will give you double spacing, and Control 5 gives you 1.5 spacing. So you'll see that in the list. Also a keyboard shortcut to removing the space. If you have space before a paragraph, you can use Control 0. And that turns the space off before the paragraph or after. Unfortunately, it doesn't remove the spacing after the paragraph. It's just if the paragraph space before was turned on. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So if you have any other questions at this point, I apologize for going a little bit over time. If you have any questions at all, please type them in the chat panel and Terry will forward those to me and I will reply by email if you have any questions that I didn't cover in the training. So I thank you for attending today's session. I hope you've learned a thing or two that maybe you didn't know before. And I look forward to having you join us again in another webinar, and enjoy the rest